We're still waiting for Gary. And Mike indicated he might be late.
Well, it was a good shellfish afternoon.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah. He said he would try to call in from his car as soon as he got off the flats.
Mhm. Yeah, we could have pushed this back a little bit had I known, but
Yeah. I don't know when they'll be done pitting their oysters, how much longer that goes on.
yeah.
But now it's getting a little bit lighter every day too, so.
Yep. So we'll give Gary a chance to join us and then we'll start.
Jim, I think I passed you walking to the pier yesterday, but of course we didn't recognize each other.
Yeah. Yeah, with a mask on, it's a little tough.
That used to happen to me a lot even before COVID.
Yeah.
Because people would see me not in a suit and they wouldn't know who I was.
That's not always a bad thing.
Yeah, I suppose it's probably okay. Let's see. Okay, Gary's okay. Okay, so we have now that we have Gary, we have everyone we are going to get, and it's 4:02. So we're going to start. Hi, Gary.
Hi.
And so I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's a meeting of the trustees of the Wellfleet Affordable Housing Trust. The meeting will be conducted via Zoom video conferencing in accordance with the temporary suspension and enhancement to open meeting law requirements by Governor Baker. Instructions for the video conference are in the meeting agenda posted on the town website. The meeting may be recorded by the town. Anyone else desiring to record the meeting may do so only after notifying the chair and may not interfere with the conduct of the meeting. And in fact, I am recording the meeting. And the first order of business is announcements and public comments. I don't know if anybody has a comment. We don't have any members of the public with us. And seeing none, we'll move into our second item, which is the discussion of trust organization. And along those lines, I had sent you weekend before last, just a memo that I thought encapsulated the things that we had talked about at our December 18th meeting, plus a few other things that occurred to me. And I guess we can use that as a basis for the discussion. And we, of course, can add anything else that occurs to any of you with respect to trust governance. I also went through the exercise this afternoon of going through the Town of Lincoln and Town of Grafton declarations of trust section by section to see if there were any significant differences. And as we get to those considerations, I can brief you on what I learned from that exercise also. So, shall we start with the number of trustees? Let me just get this down out of the way. It seems like we have 7 now. I think 7 is a common number, although I think that one of the trust bylaws says no less than 4 or more than 6, which struck me as odd because numbers are even, and the possibility of a inconclusive vote is present. Um, Thoughts on the number of trustees?
7 seems good.
It seems like a good number because, you can still conduct the meeting with one or two people unavailable. When you have small numbers of trustees, you really start to become a hostage to the quorum requirements, and sometimes it gets difficult to conduct business. Um,
How do you serve staggered terms? How would we set that up?
Well, right now, all of our terms run to June 30th of 2022. When reappointments come up, that would be, I think, up to the selectmen, but the bylaw probably should say that the terms of the trustees should be staggered so that as close to half of the trustees as possible expire each year. The selectmen have the authority to appoint. They don't have to appoint for 2 years. They can appoint for a lesser term. So they could appoint some of us for 1 year when we come up for renewal, or they could appoint somebody else.
They talk about that, Harry, when we were being appointed. I almost feel like, did they say we were appointed for 2 years already?
I suggested that they run all the appointments to June 30th, 2022, which is about 18 months.
Okay.
And I did that only because almost every other appointment in town expires on that day. And
Right.
that will prevent us from getting lost and forgetting to reappoint people and so forth. So as of right now, we have about 18 months left on our terms. So this would be something that would get fixed at that point.
Do you want us to vote on these, Harry, as we go along, or consensus?
Well, yeah, probably, but let's refine this a little bit more. We had talked a little bit about whether there should be any restrictions on the makeup of the Board of Trustees. And we had talked about should they all be Wellfleet residents, or should we have some flexibility to appoint some non-residents? And I don't know where we came down on that.
I thought that we had kind of settled with Mike suggesting that as long as the majority were Wellfleet residents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I had suggested, I don't know whether it makes a difference to say Wellfleet residents or registered to vote in Wellfleet. The latter is a little bit easier to police in the sense you got a voter registration rolls you can check. Residency is a very kind of elastic concept. If I spend 6 months in a day here, am I a resident? I don't know. I don't know if it makes a great deal of difference. Those kind of issues don't come up all that often. But I'm okay with saying a majority are Wellfleet residents myself.
If at a certain point we are no longer able to do it via Zoom, that might rule some people out.
Yes, it may.
Yeah.
Right now, just for reference, absent COVID, the open meeting laws has provisions for remote participation, but and this now goes back about to my term as town administrator. When the issue came up, the select board was advised by council that if you allowed remote participation, you had to allow it for all boards or for no boards. And because the select board wanted particularly regulatory boards to conduct their business in person, they have not voted to authorize remote participation. So as of right now, were the pandemic to ever end and we went back to the old rules, then remote participation would not be available unless the select board changed their policy. So that's a possible issue, but that can be fixed at appointment time if it turns out some people are remote and can't participate. Um,
It seemed pretty common with other trusts that they did specify that they would all have to be residents, and that may be something that gets questioned more than if we allow a broader participation, which I think is good. That may come into question a little bit, do you think?
Possibly, but there is a difference between allowing and requiring. It would still be up to the Board of Trustees, Select Board, excuse me, to say, yeah, we're going to have 7 trustees, but they're all going to be Wellfleet residents because as a matter of policy, that's what we want to do. So I don't think the bylaws should mandate the appointment of non-residents. I think it's okay to say, I think it's okay to say, that a majority have to be residents.
All right. Is the designation non-resident taxpayers a legal one? And could we say it has to be either resident or non-resident taxpayer?
No, and in fact, you run into some, it's kind of a slippery slope if you limit membership to people having a tax-paying status in town. It sort of becomes, a poll tax-like thing, like you have to be.
Could be
to be on the Board of
discriminatory.
Trustees. I'm sorry.
It could be discriminatory.
Right.
Right, but if a person was a Wellfleet resident, they wouldn't have to be a taxpayer.
Correct.
And so this would only include those people who were not Wellfleet residents. Do we want to in any way narrow that definition? That's all I would say.
Hang on a second. Michael has joined us.
Okay.
Hi, Mike. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Gary. Do you want to?
No. I was just building on what Elaine said, is should we somehow define the group of people who aren't residents? And if the answer is there's no good way to do that, then that's fine.
Okay. And then kind of the last piece of that kind of trustee makeup is, well, first of all, whether we should require representation from some other boards on the Board of Trustees. My own sense is we don't need to do that. The selectmen can do that as a matter of policy as they appoint. But how do the rest of you feel?
I agree. I feel like the less limits we put on it, we're just getting started until we get our sea legs and we really see what's necessary. I think it makes more sense for us to leave it a little bit more flexible.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, and kind of the last piece of the makeup of the Board of Trustees that has occurred to me is there's no provision in the charter or in the town bylaws for removing someone from an appointed position. There is a recall provision for elected officials. The Grafton Declaration bylaw references provisions in the Grafton Town Charter that allow trustees to be removed. The Lincoln Declaration of Trust is silent, and I don't know of any provision that would allow an appointee to be removed in the town of Wellfleet. And I just raise it for discussion, not because I'm advocating that there be a mechanism for removing trustees.
If you don't think we need it, I would keep silent on that for now.
Yeah, and just the task of creating one of those things from whole cloth is pretty daunting because you get into all kinds of due process issues and so forth. So kind of to summarize, I think where we are is 7 trustees, staggered terms, majority Wellfleet residents. And that's kind of, that seems to be where the consensus is. So if someone would like to offer that as a motion, we can dispose of that issue.
So moved.
That's Elaine.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that was Gary.
Hmm.
Okay, is there any debate on the motion? Okay, seeing none, since we're doing a video meeting, this is roll call. And we will start with Gary,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So that's 7-0. Okay. Let's see. Next issue would be, well, let's see. Elaine mentioned modifying the language in the statute to include the word supporting affordable housing. And there didn't seem to be any resistance to that.
It would really just be, I'm looking at like Grafton's, the first sentence that says, shall be to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing. I would just propose creation, preservation, and support of affordable housing. I think a bunch of these bylaws were written before the CPA changed their language to include support, and support means things like our rental assistance programs and things like that.
Okay. Other thoughts on that issue?
That sounds reasonable to me.
Okay, and to continue in that vein, I would suggest that we not seek to limit the powers of the trustees in this bylaw, but at least initially leave all of the powers that are enumerated in the statute. And they're pretty broad in scope.
I agree with that. I know at first I was kind of focusing on the fiduciary role, but I'm really kind of delighted to see that people are interested in the whole range of things, which I think is great. So I agree.
You know, I think we should preserve that flexibility for ourselves and our successors.
Mhm.
Agree.
Yes, Jim.
No, I said, I agree.
Okay. And I had also, because I'd seen it somewhere, raised some issue of whether it was necessary to have a specific power to enter into grant agreements with the Wellfleet Community Preservation Committee. I don't think it hurts, but when I went back and looked at the statutory powers, there is a power to enter into contracts, which presumably would cover that, but it might still be nice to have that explicitly enumerated as a trust power.
See any reason why not?
I can't think of any reason why not, but what do other people think?
Sounds good.
Okay.
They're going to be a major source of our funding, so we want to
Yeah. Mhm.
make that clear.
And let's see. There was a limit in the, where did I see it? Town of Lincoln Declaration of Trust or somewhere that the trust was limited in the amount of indebtedness the trust can incur to 80% of the net asset value of trust accounts, which would limit the trust's ability to borrow. I'm not sure I understand why that's necessary. And I raise it again for discussion purposes, but it seems like the vanilla powers in the statute probably would be a good starting point, and bylaws are always amendable if it's an issue.
We have never borrowed, but other trusts have done it very successfully. So I don't
Mhm.
think we'd want to cut that possibility off.
Right, the power to borrow is in the statute. This
Okay.
placed a limitation on it in one of the trusts I looked at. And again, I'm not sure I understand why. I can understand that kind of prudence in managing assets, but I'm still not sure that we need to do that. How do other people feel?
What was the limit set on it, Harry?
I think it was 80% of the net asset value of trust assets. So if the trust had assets, say, that were booked at $500,000, the most the trust could borrow would be an additional $400,000
Yeah, at all for anything.
in total.
Not just, right, okay. Yeah, that, I don't see why we would want to limit the board of trust, the trustees to abiding by that limitation if we don't need to. And I can think of some possibilities where the trust would potentially need to borrow more than it had in assets. I mean, not that we necessarily would, but the potential is there, I think, to want
And
to do that in the future for a large project.
and it's also true that the CPC has the ability to borrow based on its anticipated revenue stream. So um, uh, preservation committees do sometimes borrow to fund housing and open space projects beyond their current revenues based on that. So they would have the ability to use that tool to provide us funding anyway.
Well, and like the project that's going up, hopefully, on Lawrence Road, the town, the trust isn't gonna own that project, so it's like, that's not gonna count as an asset or anything like that, so even though it may support something like that, it just,
Mhm.
like, there's not gonna be that much asset base for the trusts to be borrowing against,
Mhm.
especially at first, so it just doesn't seem like a very good idea to limit it to that
Mhm.
percentage.
And I guess the last thing that I had in terms of trust powers should we require a super majority of the trustees to acquire or dispose of real property, more than a simple majority? It's not common in trusts that I've seen, and not just affordable housing trusts, but all trust documents. Trustees tend to act by a majority on every issue. But how do other people feel about that? Is that a valuable control?
Is that to avoid a coup?
Yeah, it's I guess with 7 members, that would mean you'd need the affirmative vote of, I think, 5 people instead of 4.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
um, again, I raise it for discussion purposes, not as an advocate for that.
I think I'd prefer not to see that. I don't know if in our own minds we can want to operate that way as much as possible without putting it into a bylaw. I mean, we could be talking about some major acquisitions,
Mhm.
but it seems a shame to put that kind of.
Okay.
It seems like at this point, it's best for, this is, the conversation seems to be saying this, and I would agree that it's best to leave it as open as possible and kind of,
Mhm.
there's some things that we may change along the way, but we don't know what they are quite yet.
Mhm. So kind of where we are is that we leave the powers to be the powers, the default powers that are enumerated in the enabling legislation, and we would like to see um, support for affordable housing included as part of the purpose, along with creation and preservation. I think those were the two that were originally there. So unless somebody else has something to add on that topic, perhaps we should vote on what we'd like to see for trust powers in a bylaw. And so are we ready for a motion on that?
Yes.
I have one point that I brought up at our last meeting that I was wondering, and I missed the beginning of this meeting, so apologize for that. But do we want to make sure that we don't sort of eliminate the possibility to support, not capital A affordable housing, or does this do that? Would this language pre-existing sort of preclude us from supporting housing initiatives or projects that are not an uppercase affordable as state guidelines or state income guidelines would recommend? So
I don't think we're, excuse me, I don't think we're limited by default that way. I think, well, let me just,
Harry, to
Yes,
that
please.
end, in the preamble or the beginning of the declarations, as well as the bylaws, it says low and moderate income. So would we take that phrase out to accommodate what Mike is saying?
well, yeah, to be specific about that, the statute says the purpose of the trust is to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing in municipalities for the benefit of low and moderate income households and for the funding of community housing. So that's kind of our purpose. Let me see if I can get back to, where'd my meeting go?
So I think we've had this discussion before. Does the
Yeah.
term community housing incorporate a higher income level than moderate?
I believe it's to 100%.
Yeah, that's what, but is that, and now, Elaine, remember we had this, we went back and forth on this. Is that a legal definition now?
I think as legal as, Mass Housing Partnership clarified that.
So does the term community housing then incorporate what Michael wants?
Well, up to 100% of AMI,
Michael?
not over.
well, I don't know what 100% of AMI is.
Yeah,
I just
it's
know
going
that
to- yeah, family of four is like $91,000. Family of two people, 60-some thousand. Barnstable keeps going up.
yeah, that's where it falls off, is sort of that family of two at 61,000. It's very difficult to find housing opportunities, whether to buy or to rent in this area, where I don't know if it's our role to deal with that or not, or if this trust should include that, or if it can really. I'm not really sure. But it seems to be a major part of our housing issue is in that sort of income range as well. That's completely unaddressed, right? Like no one's really, and there's not that much you can do, I guess. But I am sort of hung up on that fact that it's really an unaddressed problem in the Outer Cape, and kind of the core of maybe our demographics shift and future here. And so, you know, if that can be part of this, then I think it probably should be. Maybe not the focus, but, you know.
An example might be, like if we get this ADU bylaw passed, can we in any way support that, even though it's not limited as to income?
We could support it with our votes, I think, you know, yeah.
Well, it refers back to the definition in the Community Preservation Act. So I don't know if Gary and Elaine have any insight on what that means.
Community preservation funds up to 100% of
100%.
AMI.
100, okay.
Mike, I think there are ways to address it that we could advocate for. I mean, the town itself can appropriate money for a purpose that could be higher. So I think it's something to definitely that we would want to put our brains together on. And I mean, it would be an interesting question if there's any way to do it in this.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I'm thinking about sort of like, I don't know if something that can be, and I don't know if this is something that we would do either, is, you know, making loans available for people to convert into year-round rental, which aren't income restricted necessarily, but would sort of bring about more housing, you know. And then, you know, the other thing was when we had that meeting before, Elaine, with us, I forget, was it housing? Was it Hack that we met with before when we first started talking about the trust? She had a baby. I can't remember what her name was.
Oh, Andrea.
Big development partnership.
No, it's off the subject, but there was something about buying down points potentially that we had talked about, where that was something that's being done in other places. So I don't really know. I just sort of feel like it's a topic of conversation that we should probably figure out at this stage of the game, whether we can be involved in that or not, or should we or shouldn't we, you know?
There may now be a legal definition of workforce housing that goes above 100%, which maybe we could find out if we could at least, you know,
Yeah.
incorporate that.
Would it hurt to just incorporate the language regardless of whether it's legally defined? I mean, to sort of open up the possibility.
I think I'd like to know more about that before creating a category where it may be difficult to defend an action as being within the scope of the trust's purposes.
Sure.
Elaine, wasn't there a figure for like affordable accessory dwelling units that went up to 120% of AMI?
That's what the,
Or I'm just looking at that actually. So, Michael, to give you a feel for, under the AADU program, a family of 4, the maximum income is 109,800.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
that's really beyond CPC 100%.
Right.
So
20%.
I'm just looking up the definition of workforce housing here, and the Urban Land Institute, which I don't know, you know, what authority they have to set legal precedents, defines it as earning between 60 and 120% of area median income. So
So Harry, if community housing has a definition of up to 100% of median income, the
Mhm.
question is, could we do something with a definition of workforce housing up to 120% or without an upper limit? And would that be in conflict with the legislation itself?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I think that ultimately this is going to end up as a laundry list going to council saying draft us a bylaw.
You know?
So we could perhaps just ask whether we can add workforce housing with a definition like that.
I don't know if Mass Housing Partnership could advise us on that. I could approach them if you want.
Mhm.
It's a good point, Mike.
Mhm.
It's valid.
Okay, well, then perhaps we should at least include that in our laundry list and see what happens to it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And see whether it passes muster. So kind of where we are now is section 55C powers. And to expand the purpose to include create, preserve, and support, and to add the categories of housing to include workforce housing defined as up to 120% of AMI is an acronym for, help me, please,
Area
what?
median income,
area.
and we have to go by Barnstable County. They don't break it down to our little town.
Yeah. So is that kind of circle around to the end of the discussion on purpose and powers?
Do we have a mission outside of our purpose and powers, or is all of that speaking to what our mission?
Well, can you say that, repeat that, Kathleen? I'm sorry, I
Do we have a
didn't.
mission statement for what we're doing, or is our mission? Am I like having back?
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from all of a sudden. So I'm just wondering, is this our mission statement? Or are we encompassing our mission statement, or do we have a mission statement? Like, it seems like we're coming down to the nitty gritties. But I'm wondering if some of this is a bigger, could we have a bigger mission that then gets spelled out this way? And do we, and I've missed it, or do we not have that?
I'm not aware that we have that, and certainly in the context of the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund statute, it says the purpose of the trust is to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing in municipalities for the benefit of low and moderate income households and for the funding of community housing as defined in and in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44B. So that's the only thing that I have that I'm aware of. And we've already kind of pushed the boundaries a little bit by saying we also want to support those categories of housing as well as create and preserve.
So when I was doing a little of the reading of everything you guys had sent, I hopped off to look at what Brewster was doing, and they have a mission statement that is much broader in terms of the language that says the Brewster Affordable Housing Trust seeks to expand and preserve year-round rental and ownership homes. It then goes on to say that are affordable to moderate, low, and very low income households. Our efforts will foster a welcoming environment for demographically and socioeconomically diverse populations. We're committed to education, collaboration, and community engagement.
Nice.
We could certainly adopt the mission statement. I'm not sure that, well, I'm unsure whether it belongs in a bylaw or not, but maybe it does.
I would think not by law, but
Mhm,
for bylaw.
mhm.
I think that Grafton also has something called an action plan, which I know MHP was impressed with. And at some point, it could be I mean, we should actually talk about priorities and, where we want to put our efforts.
Mhm.
And maybe that could be part of something like that.
Yeah, on Brewster's website, it then goes on to give their 2020 goals and priorities. So,
Okay, as it turns out, and we'll get to this a little bit later in the agenda, Gary, Elaine and I had a conversation with the town accountant this morning about transition, and it will be a little while before we're really in a position to do something. So we do have some time to settle on that. And where it's an internal document of our trust, we're not sort of a slave to the town meeting calendar as we would be with the bylaw. So I think that there will be time to deal with that. And maybe that becomes a future agenda item for a meeting or a series of meetings, perhaps.
Mhm.
So I guess, so where I am now on trust purpose and powers for the purpose of a bylaw is all of the powers in the enabling statute, but we want to expand the scope to include support for housing and to also include workforce housing, which we have defined as up to 120% of AMI. We all in the same place on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Shall we vote on a motion to that effect? If someone wants to offer it,
So moved.
that's Gary.
Yes.
Is there a second?
second,
Okay, who is that, please?
Take your pick. Sharon,
Okay, well, it's Sharon. Okay. And is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, well, back to our roll call. Gary,
Yeah, aye.
Elaine,
I,
Jim,
Aye.
Kathleen,
aye.
Sharon,
I,
Mike,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So it's a 7-0 unanimous. So let's see, where does that get me to? I had an item, should expenditure of trust funds be handled the same way town warrants and payments of bills are handled? We didn't discuss that, and I don't think we need to put it in a bylaw. I mean, typically, and I'm sure Gary and Elaine can elaborate on this, what happens is, if we have a bill to pay, it goes on a warrant for payment of bills that the trust approves, and it goes to the treasurer to pay. So, is there anything else that anybody wants to talk about, including in bylaws?
there's a section, acts of trustees and liability. Are those things just boilerplate?
Yeah, I was going to head next to declaration of trust, which is a separate document.
Okay.
And I went through this morning, I think it was, I don't remember now, the Grafton and the Lincoln declarations of trust, and they're remarkably similar. Both do not include the word support in their purpose, which we're going to do. For purposes Lincoln has some additional requirements that the funds only be spent in the United States and that there be no propaganda or expenditure of funds to influence legislation, which is illegal anyway. I don't see any need to consider adding those things because I don't really see what purpose they serve, except possibly to express some conservative values. Both trusts are recorded. The Grafton Trust, I think, is recorded in its entirety in the Registry of Deeds. The Lincoln Trust, I think they've probably recorded a certificate of trust, which is a mechanism that allows you to record just an abstract document that identifies the trust powers that relate to real estate and any conditions for the exercise of this. So that's a distinction I don't worry about because, you know, whichever one we do, we do. On Article 3 in both of them, and they follow the same pattern. The Grafton one, vacancies are filled by the Board of Selectmen, and Grafton also has a provision for removal of trustees, I think because there's a charter provision that deals with that. Lincoln's trust says vacancies are filled by the remaining trustees, which I think is kind of odd. And I would not be in favor of that. And then, let's see, the meetings. The Grafton Declaration of Trust mandates a monthly meeting, and it requires it be posted in accordance with the open meeting law. The Lincoln Trust requires a quarterly meeting with 10 days advance notice. And that kind of seems unworkable to me. I think we probably should in the trust document specify that we'll meet at some minimum interval, but we should be free to meet as circumstances arise. So maybe a required quarterly meeting's a good thing, but it shouldn't foreclose meeting, you know, as circumstances require us to respond.
So would you not even say monthly, Harry? You would just say meetings at such time and place as shall determine?
Yeah. I think I'd require that we do meet maybe quarterly just to make sure that the trust doesn't sort of fade into oblivion in the future. But I certainly would allow the trust to meet as often as it feels is necessary to conduct its business. Mm-hmm. And then the entire rest of the trust is, both trusts are identical. The powers in both declarations essentially follow the statute. The Article 6 talks about the validity of acts of trustees. They're word for word identical. The same thing for liability, amendments, accounting, duration, apparent authority of the trustees to act, and definition of terms are all the same. If I were to pick one, I'd pick the Grafton one. And about the only changes I'd make is I'd remove the language about removal of trustees. And I'd say a meet at a minimum quarterly, and that would be the only meeting provision I'd put in there. And one other thing that's not in either trust document that I would suggest, it's typical when you deal with real estate that someone who's engaged in a transaction with the trust wants to create a record of the trust's authority to take the action, very much like a corporate certificate of vote that the corporation's authorized to sign a deed. There would be a trustee's certificate that recites all of the conditions for the trustees to act have been met. But one thing I'd suggest is allowing the town clerk to provide a certificate as to who the current trustees are and allow people to rely on that. So that's kind of my thoughts on a declaration of trust. How do other people feel?
It would seem there's no point in reinventing the wheel. I mean, if these folks are already doing it and it seems to be working out. And certainly if you've looked at it with that eye, Carrie, sounds fine to me.
And in my former life as a real estate attorney, I've read a lot of trust documents for the purpose of satisfying for my client that, you know, the trustee that's selling the property has the authority to act, and making sure that that's documented on the record. So I'm very sensitive to how lenders and purchasers look at actions by trustees. And I think these documents address that adequately.
Going to have to take your word on that.
Right.
That's fine, but we'll get council's word on it too. So it won't be just me. So I would propose that we use the Grafton Trust as a model, that we go ahead. Did somebody want to say something? That we use the Grafton Trust as a model, and let's see. I'm just trying to write it and talk at the same time, so you'll have to excuse me. With the following 3 changes: that the minimum frequency of meetings be quarterly, not monthly. That the town clerk be allowed to certify as to who the currently serving trustees are. And that we remove the language in the Grafton Trust about removal of trustees by the Board of Selectmen. And I'm open to anything else people would like to put in this kitchen sink type document.
Is this where we suggest putting in the word support too?
Yes, thank you. We probably would want to put in support and also add workforce housing language too.
Yeah.
Okay. Motion, anybody?
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second,
And that was Jim?
Jim.
Jim,
Okay. Discussion? Okay, roll call again. Let me go back to my list. Gary,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
Jim,
aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
chair votes aye. So that's 7-0 unanimous. I think, yeah, go ahead.
I just figured I forgot to mention this. The charter's changed it from Board of Selectmen to Select
Board, yes.
language.
I will conform that. My fingerprints are all over that, along with Helen's.
I know. Channeling Helen.
Yes. And yeah, okay. I had some other questions one that we probably need to raise probably with the town administrator in terms of access to counsel for preparing documents like this. If necessary, access to counsel for guidance on winding up the affairs of the current housing trust. Access to town administrative services, fiscal, such as accounting, payment of bills, management of accounts, access to the town clerk in terms of certifications and stuff like that. I'd like to at least raise those issues with Maria to make sure that there isn't some concern there that would limit the town's willingness to provide that kind of support. I'd be surprised if there was, but and then the kind of the last question I had on that area was the whole issue of liaison between the trust and the town. Should that be directly with the Board of Selectmen or with the town administrator? Who do we talk to?
I mean, I assume that the purpose of having a select board member required to be on this trust would be that they are sort of acting as a liaison to that board also. So I think that it would be a reasonable assumption that the select board member on this trust would fulfill that role. And the other thing I was going to say is that I think as far as access to resources of town resources, I would think that would be something that would be, brought before the select board to vote on, as it's a matter of town policy more than administration, as far as whether the town would administer and provide the resources for this trust.
Mm-hmm. That certainly makes sense. And it would be a similar relationship as with the enterprise funds, where the enterprise funds are typically charged with the cost of providing those services. And kind of on that line, I don't know, Elaine or Gary, do you want to talk a little bit about our conversation this morning with Heather?
I'm sorry, Harry, with respect to how we transition from one trust to the other.
Yeah.
So we met this morning via Zoom with the new town accountant, Heather, who is very good and very open about how do we manage the housing accounts that are there now, but also how do we transition from the existing housing authority trust, which according to the town accounting has a balance of approximately $130,000, $140,000, to move it from the existing trust, which is managed by the housing authority, to the new trust, which is managed by ourselves. And also that would be the recipient, if we are successful, of the CPC application, which has been approved for $500,000 of funding for the trust for affordable housing purposes. So I think that really the question is when we take control of what. And Harry and the rest of us discussed a timetable of approximately February. And the reason for that is that we would be able to set up the trust successfully by then. And the second big gating issue is the hope that we would have a review. I don't think it's an audit, but I think it's a review by the outside auditors as to the actual amount in the trust, as well as how to transfer it over.
Since that's a town fund, I found the enabling legislation for the
Original trust?
For the original trust, and it is a marvel of brevity. And I'll show it to you. It's 3 sections long. So Let's see, we want the entire screen, allow. Okay, so, so where did it go? That's it. Yeah, you could see that it's not a true trust. It's a fund.
Hmm.
And the fund's maintained by the town treasurer. And the authority to add to and disperse from rests with the housing authority. And that's it. It's these three tiny sections. So it's really kind of in the same category as like the beach sticker fund and the recycling fund and all the other funds, except there's a specific call out that the housing authority can spend without town meeting action. So unwinding that, I think, is going to be fairly simple. Let's see if we can stop sharing. So there we go. So because it's a town fund, it will be included in the town's audit, which is going to start in January. So the benefit of that is we have a clean starting place because the existing fund has been audited, its balance has been verified, the transactions against that have been approved by the auditors, and we're starting with a clean sheet. The other thing we discussed was combining some of the sub-accounts that you hold funds under that can be combined. Seems to me that there were a couple of accounts, small accounts there that were sort of overlapping.
Yes, but for the most part, well, that's a good question. So going forward, those are accounts and programs administered by the housing authority. And the question would be, would that continue to be the case, or would there be some change to that? Does the trust have any role to play in that?
Well, we can certainly, and I guess that's kind of the overarching question that we haven't talked about is how do we divide the responsibility between the housing authority and the Affordable Housing Trust? And at least as a starting point, my inclination would be for the housing authority to continue to do the things that they've always done, and that we just become the checking account for those activities. And that any new activity, we can decide who's going to be the actor. And so I wouldn't look to reduce the scope of the housing authority's activities without a purpose to doing so, and I don't see one right now. We should have that discussion with the housing authority, I think. And so that's kind of where we are here. And I think what I propose for an action is to just summarize what we've agreed we want to do. Actually, we didn't actually vote on the, did we vote on the trust? Yes, we did. Sorry. To transmit those requests to the town administrator and the select board and ask them to provide the resources to get those documents drafted. And perhaps give them an opportunity to comment on them first.
Sounds good.
And I'm happy to do that, or I can prepare a document that we can review and approve at another meeting, whatever your pleasure is.
I'm not sure we have to review it before you send it on, kind of keep things moving.
And I'll certainly copy everyone so somebody can squawk if I've missed something. The only other things that I have left on our agenda are agenda items for future meetings. And future meeting schedule. At this point, I think if I recall from the discussion this morning, the Housing Authority is meeting on January 7th or thereabouts.
Yes.
I can.
And I might just be part of the audience for that.
Right.
And
Anybody?
then see where we need to go. See when we next need to meet based on that meeting and what, if anything, we get back in terms of either comments to our documents or actions taken to draft them.
Harry,
So we
I
can-
have something under items for another meeting.
Okay,
Did it come before your schedule or after?
how about right now?
Okay. I was approached today by someone who represents a Wellfleet resident who unfortunately is terminally ill.
Mhm.
And they are interested in potentially giving the house to the town for the purpose of affordable housing.
Mhm.
Now, Harry, would it be the trust that would be the recipient of that? And is the trust part of the town, and would all nature of the donations apply if they were to give the house to the town via the trust for affordable housing?
Yeah, because to do it outside of the Affordable Housing Trust really requires acceptance of a gift by town meeting. And, you know, in the best of times, that'll happen on the fourth Monday in April. And in the worst of times, who knows when the annual meeting will be. So that's one of the purposes of an Affordable Housing Trust, is to accept gifts of both money and property. So probably that's where it should come.
So Harry, if they actually pursue this,
Yeah,
could I then put them in touch with you, or we could set up a conversation together to talk about the process and what are the legal requirements?
sure. And that's, if you look at the purposes in the statute, that's the
Yeah.
first one: to accept
Right.
and receive real property, personal property, or money by gift, grant, contribution, devise, or transfer.
And Harry, the fact that we don't yet have a bylaw or a declaration, does that limit us?
I don't think so, but I can certainly forward that request for advice. I don't think it does, because I don't see anything that says we have to have bylaws, only that we are allowed to have bylaws.
So we could receive a gift at this point, we, the trust.
I think so. I'd want to check with council, but I think that's what the answer would be.
Okay.
And-
As it was
and-
described to me, it's a fairly imminent thing, so that's what I'm
Yeah.
just trying to get guidance on.
Yeah, and we're more flexible than town meeting itself, and
Right.
that's one of the reasons why we're here.
Okay,
Okay, anything else under future agenda items? Okay, how about minutes from December 18th? I sent them out sometime around the 20th.
Yep.
I hope I've spelled everyone's name correctly.
There's
Um,
an S on the end of Eggers in the present.
What'd you say, Elaine?
I think there's an extra S on the end of your name, Sharon. Because
Oh, in the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't even
The-
catch.
I got it in the top, but did I have, did I
you
miss
don't
it
want-
somewhere else? Ah, there, yeah, I see.
it's just-
Okay.
That's
well,
my email.
Yep, we'll just select, we'll just, I will correct that as necessary.
What, do you want to deal with any typos or anything at this?
You can give them to me, but I'll just make the corrections.
Okay.
So
Under-
what else?
What I've done, Harry, I actually printed it out and I have done kind of underlined where there's a number of ones that need to be corrected.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll scan it and send it over to you.
Okay. Are they numerous, Jim?
I said it's probably 10 or 15.
Half dozen.
I typed this myself.
Can we approve it as amended without specific amendments?
Why don't we just have Jim send over his corrections, and I will correct Sharon's surname, and we'll just hold this for the next meeting.
That's fine.
Sounds fine.
Sounds good.
Okay. So that's all I have. Unless,
Plenty.
okay, then we would be ready for a motion to adjourn. It's 5:10.
So Harry, when is our next meeting?
Yeah.
When would you like it to be? I kind of left that hanging depending on future events. The potential gift you mentioned, Gary, the Housing Authority meeting in early January, and whether we get any feedback or blowback from our requests for documents. But we can certainly schedule one right now if you'd like.
Are we waiting until after we get the bylaws reviewed before we address what Kathleen had brought up in terms of mission statement and all that?
No, we should set up a meeting for doing that.
How about a mid to late January meeting date? And if we need to change it, we will.
Okay, so let's
I don't know what day is good for folks.
let's see, month. I have basically, except for Wednesdays, because I tend to have building committee meetings that day. Any other day is fine with me, and afternoon or evening times are all fine with me.
How does Tuesday the 19th at 4 o'clock, just to pick a date?
Michael, did you check the tide chart?
Or is that
Yeah,
a
I'm
select board
just-
meeting?
I'm just wondering if that's a Tuesday that the select board
It
meets.
could be a select board meeting.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I wouldn't mind just doing it on Mondays if Mondays work for people.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, Monday, the 18th is Martin Luther King Day. Does that represent a problem?
What about the next
For
Monday?
me,
So Monday, the 18th at 4 o'clock, Harry?
That would be fine with me. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, let me just check the tide chart there,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
While you're doing that, Sharon, just as an aside, we haven't printed those flyers yet.
But I don't know where to pick them up, even if they are printed.
Sharon, there's a slot, there's a metal mailbox type of thing, and there's a slot for outgoing mail
Oh, yeah.
in the back, and I'm anticipating that they'll go in there, but we haven't printed them, so I'm not sure whether that they'll fit in there or.
Okay. Okay.
That works for me, Monday, the 18th.
Okay.
Okay. And primarily, I won't post an agenda until close to that to see what we have to deal with in addition to a mission statement, which
Right.
will be on that agenda. Okay?
Right, great.
All
Thank
right.
you for all this work you did to prepare all this,
Yeah.
Harry.
They
Thank you so much.
went so
Okay.
smoothly.
And let us know what we can do, what else we can do.
Okay. So we ready for a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
That's
Second.
Mike. Sharon. Roll call vote. Gary?
Hi, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Yes. Elaine?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Kathleen?
aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. 7-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Eric.
much.
Thank you, Harry.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
So Gary, just let me know when those are ready.
Okay, Elaine is going to get them printed, so I think I'll let Elaine. And also, we have updated